Hello, my name is Khoi Vo. I am the CEO of ASID, and you're watching A Student's Perspective.
Hi there, and thanks for tuning in to A Student's Perspective, the weekly series that connects students with designers, manufacturers, educators, industry professionals, and design media celebrities to hear their stories on just how they've gotten to where they are now. Through our conversations, we connect the past, present, and future of design to show just how much we can learn from each other to grow towards our fullest potential without prescribed limitations. Think of A Student's Perspective as a weekly design lecture series from the student's point of view. A Student's Perspective is a division of the nonprofit University Hall of Innovation, whose goals are to connect students with the design industry through design challenges and mentorship, and a collaboration with the Marywood University Interior Architecture Program in Scranton, Pennsylvania. All interviews can be found in their video format at www.astudentsperspective.tv. For more information or sponsorship inquiries, please contact universityhallofinnovation@gmail.com.
Hello everyone, my name is Vanessa. Today we're here with Khoi Vo. How are you doing today, Khoi?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well as well.
Good.
Would you mind giving us a little bit of a more in-depth introduction about yourself?
Sure. I have an architecture background. I have my master's in architecture. I practiced for a while when I graduated, and then slowly moved into interiors. And then I was moved into the academic world and became a professor while still practicing. I've had many different experiences, from being a practitioner to being an educator. Most recently, within the academic realm, I've been an administrator running our university's Hong Kong campus. And then most recently, right before my position at ASID, I was working as the as a collaborator for industry. And so what we were doing was we were bringing in projects, working with industry to bring in projects for our students and faculty to work on. And so it was a really amazing opportunity for us to expose our students to so many real life problems and challenges. And now, most recently, I've just became the Chief Executive Officer for ASID.
You have a lot of amazing accomplishments that went to getting to where you are today.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm interested, you mentioned that you had an architectural background. Would you mind explaining how you shifted from architectural to interior, and
Sure.
maybe led to that?
Yeah, I think I think when I was going to school, I really was focused on becoming an architect, and I thought I really understood what that profession, at least for me, would be. And as I went through, when I started practicing, I really came to the conclusion that I wanted to deal with space in a smaller scale. And really, the appeal for me was really being able to directly influence the stakeholders or the users of the space, versus really focusing on the envelope and the structural system of a project. And so I just felt like interior design really gave me that opportunity to really dive in and hone my skills doing that. And so, I took on more and more interior design projects. And then, as I mentioned, I had this opportunity to teach interior design at a university. And so I happily jumped into that. And really, it was about it did reassure me or reinforce that that was where I wanted to be. Being able to deal with the interior spaces, understanding materials in a more detailed way, understanding lighting, understanding just human behavior. Those were the things that were of interest to me, even when I was in architecture school. And so for me, interior design as a discipline really was able to amplify those interests for me. And that's why I continue to pursue a career within interior design.
I think you described interior design perfectly, like creating a space for people to evoke feeling and kind of just making spaces for specific clients. I think that's like a perfect description of interiors, and that was one of my main driving forces to be interior as well, to kind of create these spaces for specific feelings or specific spaces rather than, like you said, the envelope. I really like that word, envelope.
Yeah, it's when I was a professor, I used to tell my students it's a tough practice, because we as designers, we can affect or manipulate all the surfaces and all of the materials within the floor, the walls, the ceiling. But really what we're trying to do is really affect the human condition and human emotion. So we're working with this physical thing to really try to evoke feelings and emotion. And so it's a really interesting I love problems. I love solving problems. And so this was always been a really interesting challenge and a problem that I've always wanted to be a part of. And so that was always the appeal for me, and I think a lot of my students felt the same way. So
well, kind of what was it like using your like interior and your architectural degree and using that towards teaching?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I never, I'll start by saying I never had a formal education in interiors. It was always, I did my undergraduate in architecture, and then I did my master's in architecture as well. But practicing really gave me a lot of obviously meaningful experience. That the opportunity to teach, at first I thought was a way for me to pass on the knowledge that I gained in the profession to the next generation of students and designers. It was something that I've always felt like I needed to do, because I had such wonderful teachers that were giving me and teaching me about their experiences. So I felt like it really was a responsibility of mine to contribute to that system where we were passing on skills and knowledge to the next generation. But what I really discovered, surprisingly, and really it is what really evoked my passion in teaching, was that I was learning as much from the students as I was teaching them, if not more. And I think a lot of factors played within this issue, which is, I was lucky enough to have students throughout. I mean, I said taught a little bit. I really taught for over 20 plus years at this point, right? And so throughout that time, I was lucky enough to be able to teach a lot of students from a amazingly diverse background. And I mean that in the sense of cultural race. I mean that in economic status. I mean that in just geography within the U.S., within the world. And so it always lends so many different perspectives. And I always felt like this was such an amazing discipline, where we would have like a common problem, let's say, that we identify, but the solution that we all came to solve these problems were always so different and could be so different. And that was affected obviously by our background as designers and as our experiences as humans. And so it was great for me, because it was a vehicle for me to understand the diverse perspectives that my students were bringing to the table to solve problems. And so that was always the appeal for me, was always constantly learning, constantly understanding how a designer really looks at a problem, and how they make it their own, right, and figure it out for themselves, and have their unique voice heard through the way they solve these problems. So that was the amazing kind of thing that kept me, and is still keeping me moving forward as far as my career. And I think even now, when I was a professor, and then I jumped into being a chair for over 8 years at in the department. And so I was starting to transition into administrative But the good thing was that it was still kind of a learning, obviously it was still a learning environment. And it was also still, there was still this exchange of ideas. I just was doing it on kind of a different level where I was really affecting the department's curriculum. I was trying to set the direction of that. I was working with professors and really dealing with pedagogical issues that would ultimately affect the education of our students. And so for me, it was kind of just, it wasn't a completely different thing. It was just kind of amplifying and increasing in scale the things that I had initially come to and love about our profession.
Yeah. So you mentioned like learning from different cultures and different locations. I feel like I could relate to that on maybe like a smaller scale. I had recently just studied abroad in Italy, and learning there was definitely like a bit of a culture shock, but I feel like I definitely learned a lot about who I am as a designer, but also all of these different like aspects of design that I didn't really consider.
Yeah.
And I feel like travel and like experiencing other cultures also has like a insane weight on design, and it's really important, I feel like, for designers to go experience different types of cultures. So it's amazing to hear that you have been to all these different locations and experienced cultures.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important. I'm so glad to hear that you had this experience. I could see it so evidently in the students that had traveled and been exposed to different experiences and different cultures and how they approach design, and those that hadn't. And so I would always encourage anyone who has the opportunity to travel, right? And I don't mean it, I mean it internationally, but I think it's also important to travel throughout our own country. You know, I was just having a conversation about this where, West Coast designers think very differently than East Coast designers, and versus the, designers within the middle of our country. North and South is also different perspectives. So I think that's the wonderful thing about being a designer, is really you absorb and you work, the vernacular of that area that you are in or that you have experienced comes out in your work. And so, I always say, go travel, right? And do as much traveling as you can. And I would even say one more thing, which is I always encourage my students, find a place that you cannot, that does not speak English, right? And there's reasons for that. And the reasons is really, we rely on language so much to get, to get through our life, right? Through the world. But when you don't have that, you start to think about other ways of communicating, and then that really, and communication is so tied to culture. The language is so tied to culture. The way, I don't know if you were able to study Italian, but if you do, the nuances of how something is described in English versus in Italian. And so for me, again, it added that other layer of understanding different people than yourself, right? And so I would always say, yeah, go to a country, but make sure, don't just go to a country that speaks English. Go to a country where you really need to hone, different skills and learning how to communicate. So that was always really important to me.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And the language, I appreciate what you said about that. It was kind of like developing a new like critical thinking skill where you like have to adapt and use your resources. And I think that you could really pull that into different aspects of your life, like design, and critically think about things differently than you normally would. I think travel is definitely a really important thing for all people, especially design students, to experience.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what your interests are moving forward, if it's residential, if it's commercial, if it's healthcare. Different cultures view that in different ways, right? Even down to the basics of our daily rituals, right? The domestic setting is much different in the US than it would be in South America, in Europe, in China, or Asia, right? And so the way our profession is evolving, it's becoming so global that you will be at a disadvantage if you don't understand different cultures, because there's a very good chance that when you get out of school and you're practicing, you might be put on a project, in, let's say, the Middle East. And so for you to design with let's say, a US perspective on trying to figure out how to solve a problem that's, maybe has a very specific Middle Eastern cultural perspective, you'll be at a disadvantage, right? So it was, you do need to absorb all these, different ways of people live and how they interact with each other. And I think that will only help you to become a better designer. I remember in undergraduate, I think the thing that resonated with me and stayed with me for a long time too was we had this really amazing architect come to do critiques and do a presentation, and we were following him around everywhere, just listening to every single word he had to say, right, about architecture. But the most important thing he said that I took away from it, there was at one point where he stopped midway through a critique, and he looked at all of us and he said, listen, I can continue to critique you in the architectural projects you're doing, but I want to make sure I stress that to be a good, at that point, an architect or a designer is to understand life. So he said, yes, you need to study, you need to be in school, but he said, go to a symphony, go take up a concert, go read a great book, go, take your shoes off and walk in the grass in the park, go and lay down and look at the sky, because these are the things that ultimately affect you as a designer, as much as learning about structural systems, materials, and egress and fire safety, life safety issues. Those things have to come in and play just an equal, if not more, factor in the way you design. And so I always remember that, and again, that led to this idea of like, traveling just amplified that idea for me. And so I've always been a really big proponent of that for myself and for my students as well. So.
Absolutely. I think it's really so important for everyone to do. And I read up a little bit about you. You were the vice president of SCAD Hong Kong. So do you teach there, or how was that type of?
No, it was a wonderful experience. I was there for a little over 2 years. And so I did not teach. I was the person in charge of the campus. So I did everything from I was involved in kind of operational things about the school to academic things. I was working closely with the deans and chairs in all the departments to working with student life staff members, right, and the team, and making sure that the students that were there were obviously the first and foremost safe. We had a safe environment, we had a positive environment, and we had an environment that facilitated, exploration, right? No matter what. The school had so many disciplines within art and design. And so we wanted to make sure that if you were a illustrator, or if you were a fashion designer, or if you were an interior designer, that we were providing the best experience we can in that specific context, right? We were in Hong Kong. We were on the Kowloon side, which is physically attached to the to China side, and but we were also in the heart of the whole Asia Pacific region, which is amazing. You think for us, we drive a couple hours and we get to another state, right? There you travel for a couple hours, you're in a whole different country, you're in a whole different culture, they're not speaking the same language, and so that's within of your fingertip. You can do that every weekend. And so it was really an amazing experience. And I also took advantage of that personally, where my family and I travel quite a bit just to understand and absorb all the cultures that were within our reach as far as traveling goes. So it was great. I felt like although I wasn't directly teaching, I was definitely doing things that had strong, results or effect within the teaching, experience or the learning experience of the students. So
I think traveling to China or Asia, those places seem like amazing to me, but also I'm afraid because I would never be able to understand the language. So
yeah,
I appreciate the concept of go there to learn and to think critically, but also I'm a bit fearful of like, how am I gonna like make it there? But it is somewhere that I would love to see and travel. My cousin to Thailand. She said it was like the most amazing experience of her life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I
Yeah.
would love to travel the world. Like,
Well, your fear factor should actually be an indicator that you really should do it, right? Like I think, yeah, it's a bit of a cliche, but always do things that you're uncomfortable, right? Because that means you're growing. That means you're learning new things. Because if you do the same thing, I have an 11-year-old, and it just comes down to even food, right? He can eat pizza every day, all day long, for the rest of his life. But until he starts eating different things, he won't know that he likes other things. And I feel the same way about us as people and as designers, is that yes, we can continue to do the same thing that's comfortable for us, but until we start to do things that are outside of our comfort zone, outside of our experiences, we will never, we won't learn, we won't continue to grow. So yeah, go do it. I did not speak Mandarin or Chinese so it wasn't like I got there and was, just totally ready to go. I mean, I was basically a tourist as well for a long time there, right? And I had to. There was a lot of hand gestures, right? There was a lot of kind of like miming to kind of figure out how to get somewhere, But the cool thing too, and I think this was really super important, is that when you're in that point of vulnerability, you will see, and it's not a surprise to me anymore because I've traveled so much. You see how good people are and how caring they are. I have to say, there was never a bad experience where I was lost or I obviously looked confused, where someone wasn't ready to help me. Right. And even if they didn't speak the language, and it didn't matter if it was a young child, if it was an adult, if it was an elderly person, when you approach somebody with that vulnerability of, you're lost, you don't know what's going on, people really go out of their way to help you. And again, that informs me, because when I come back to the US, and, I live in an area which has a lot of tourists here, and I see someone, lost, for me, it was like, it triggers me remembering when I was lost somewhere else. And it gives me a different perspective on how I approach them, and offer them assistance or help. So again, that just another example why it's important to experience new things, because it will come back and affect you in your life and almost everything you do.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate that, what you said about uncomfortability and like using that to your advantage, because sometimes I think I stray a little too much, where I'm like, oh, I just don't know if this is right for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I have people in my corner that are pushing me, being like, no, this is right for you, just do it. And
yeah.
It's always nice to hear it reconfirmed, saying this uncomfortable stage is just a phase and it'll make you stronger in the end. I think that's really important to learn as a student.
Yeah. And as an educator, really, one of the big things I remember, the mark for success for me as a professor, as a teacher, right? I was lucky enough to teach students when they first started the program, so they were very green and couldn't figure anything out with interior design, all the way to when they graduated as seniors or when they were, graduate school. And the thing was the biggest increase was not only the knowledge of the profession or the practice, it was the exponential increase in their confidence level. And to me, that's really important, right? That you go into things with confidence, and you can only have confidence when you have already experienced something and understand how you reacted to it, and feel, that makes you feel more comfortable, right? You're telling me about you're nervous about going, but I promise you go once, the next time you go, it will not feel so intimidating, right? And because you're like, well, what was I afraid of? All the fears that I had really actually didn't exist. Or let's say if you did experience something bad, at least now you're aware of it, and now you know how to react differently to be prepared for it, right? And so confidence is such a big deal. I think throughout my career as an educator, I find that students who have confidence in their own ability and have confidence in themselves are the ones that are more prone to growing faster and having more success quicker, right? And so I encourage everyone, and that's, please don't take me wrong, I'm not talking about arrogance where you have like false confidence in something, right? I mean, build, learn and build yourself, and then have faith in yourself, and don't be so nervous that you can't do it. I don't know how many times, and I'm sure you and your colleagues, your peers have said it, oh, I can't do that. Oh, I don't know how to do that. Well, how are you gonna know? How are you gonna know, right? You gotta go do it, right? And that first time is always gonna be the first time. But the cool thing is that first time will only be the first time once, right? And then it just gets easier, it gets easier, it gets easier, right? And that lends me to just one other thing I wanted to tell you guys is like communication is so important. And so the other thing that I was always very keen on making sure my students understood was no matter what a great designer you are, if you don't communicate well your thoughts and ideas, that you're never going to be good. You're never going to be successful. You're never going to satisfy the things that your stakeholders need you to help them with. And I mean that in verbal, right? Learning how to speak to people, right? And learning how to effectively communicate with your ideas verbally to someone, to written, writing an email that's succinct and that's appropriate and that's to the point and clear, to interpersonal communication or visual communication as well, the other two. So interpersonal, meaning, do you have the ability to walk into a crowd and, by the time you leave, you've met 3-4 different people that you never met before. You now can put them into your network and then, draw from that, right? And benefit from those relationships. And then graphically, obviously, we're in the world of, our world is all about visuals, right? And so it's one thing for me to be able to kind of visualize a space I'm designing for a client that's going to be super amazing. But if I can't draw it, or I can't sketch it, or I can't build something that shows that, what good am I as a designer, right? So it's so many different things that you have to do. You have to learn the craft. You have to learn what it means to have to affect space and learn about materials, but also learn to be an effective communicator as a designer. And so I think those are the key things to success.
Absolutely. And I'm a little curious to know how you took all of these different aspects in your journey. So you started in the practicing architecture, you went to teaching, and then you went to vice president, chairman. Now you are CEO of ASID, American Society of Interior Designers. So, how did you kind of get to where you are today? Is it from using like everything you've learned, or?
That's a great question. Yeah. So yes, the answer is yes. The answer is yes, 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 yes. Right. To all those things, the thing, you will always have learning opportunities, even when you fail at something, right? You only fail if you didn't do it right and you didn't learn from it. So I always make sure I learn things, right, when things don't go right for me, let's say. But the other thing is really, setting goals and having, a trajectory, right? I'm a big goal setter, even if it's like making a list, for the day, to making a list for the week. So I do it in chunks, right? Because I don't want to overwhelm myself and go, hey, Khoi, today I woke up and I need to accomplish all my life's goals. That's never going to happen, right? And it's going to be so intimidating and so overwhelming. It just doesn't work. So I never thought, I would ever be able to be in a position of leading this society. But it was about, making incremental steps, right? Growing incrementally. Okay, now I've learned to be a designer. Can I pass that knowledge on to education? Oh, now I'm an educator. Can I use that to learn how to be, an administrator, and so on and so on. So you continue to build, right? And then lastly, it's super important for you to identify and utilize mentors, right? And you don't, I think it's important for you to understand you need more than one mentor, because your life is very complex, like everyone's life, and there are experts at every aspect of your life, right? And so you need to be able to tap into those experts to mentor you, to guide you through your life. So there might be somebody who's a professional mentor, there might be someone who is a personal mentor, and so forth. And that's the way that, you know, you build upon a network, and you're able to benefit from this collective knowledge and experience of so many people that you admire. So the first thing I always tell people is, you know, like if they're in a new situation, like you know, a lot of my students graduate and they go into work, you know, and they're nervous, and you know, especially if they're working in a really big firm, and even when they're working in a small boutique firm, I always say, okay, I know you're nervous, don't worry about it. Here's what you first do. You identify those people in that environment that you think are doing really cool stuff, or are cool people and are successful, and you go up to them and you say, I would love to learn from you. You know, I would love for you to be my mentor. And, you know, however the arrangement is for them to be comfortable, because a lot of people are busy, and a lot of people are hesitant to commit to things like that. So you have to be flexible and saying, you know, we're talking about like a coffee every other week. We're talking about me being able to call you if I have something pressing, or texting you when I have something pressing to get your advice. And people, you know, good people will remember their journey and their mentors and their people that guided them, and they will be more than happy to do that for you, you know. And so please, you know, everyone that's listening to this, go out and identify the mentors in your life, right? And make sure you approach them and you ask them, you know, to be involved with them, you know. And I think that's a super important thing too.
Absolutely. I think that's really important for students to definitely hone in on and to understand the importance behind a mentor. I know if I pursue my master's here at Marywood, we get to choose a couple of our mentors. And it's kind of just like thinking about, okay, who fulfills what for my goals. And it's really important to understand that these people will help you in the best they possibly can. So I think that every student that's listening to this needs to know that a mentor is super important. And
yeah, totally. And you know, they don't have to necessarily be like the top experts of whatever you know, it's just somebody you admire, someone that you've observed. So you know, a little word of caution: be selective, right? Make sure you kind of ask yourself, like, why would I approach this person? Why do I think they're so important to me? And if you can answer those questions confidently, then that's the person you want to approach and be part of your network, be part of your life. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
So we've spoken about your journey and an educator. Our final question would be, if you could give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh man. Yeah. I unfortunately, I don't think it's one piece of advice, right? I think it's multiple, and a lot of it is the things that you and I have already discussed today in this conversation. This is going to sound super cheesy. It's not meant to. It's really specific, and take it to heart. Be present, right? Here's why I say that, because, you know, when I was in your shoes, all I could think about was like, I just need to graduate. I just need to finish this class. I just need to finish this exam. I need to study for this. I just need to finish the semester out. And so I was always kind of looking, and I know this sounds a little contrary to what I was saying about setting goals and making lists, but you do need to do that. But you need to be in the present day to go, okay, what do I need to get done today and accomplish today and experience today to continue to build on multiple days to get to the point you want to be at? Because if you're always constantly, you know, out there, you're not present. And that also means now too, unfortunately, with the world that we live in and the advancement in technology, it's super easy for you to sit there and you might be on your phone. You're not present. You know, someone might be talking to you. You're not present, right? You're looking at your phone. You're looking at websites that interest you. You're looking at social media, and you're kind of sort of, you know, tricking yourself and thinking that you're having a meaningful conversation with someone because you can kind of like repeat the last thing they said to you, right? And that was kind of like evident that you're listening, but you're not, right? And so there's not too many great multitasker, right, people out there. And so, yeah, that's what I would tell myself. It's like, enjoy it, right? Enjoy being an undergrad. Enjoy the stress of being a student, you know, and enjoy all that and absorb it, because you need to live in that moment. It's, you know, something people always say to me that resonates: you only get to live this one present moment once, right? And so once it's gone, it's gone. So you can't travel back in time and go, oh gosh, I just blew this whole week doing nothing. Let me relive it and really, you can't do that, right? So start now. It's never too late. Start now and just remember, like if you're in a situation, be there, and that means for everything. If you're talking to a friend over coffee or whatever, be there, engage with them, talk to them. If you're listening to a lecture, be there and listen to what people are saying. When you're in class, listen to your professors, engage with them, talk to them, be there, be present. And I think that's my biggest advice to younger Khoi, I guess, would be that.
Absolutely. And I think I could definitely resonate with that as well, because I'm always anxious about, well, what's my next move? I'm always constantly thinking about what's happening outside of myself in the moment. And I don't give myself enough time to breathe and appreciate what I'm doing right now. I feel like, especially as a student, I am like constantly juggling a bunch of different types of things. And as much as I love that constant riff of going back and forth and doing one class to another, or doing interviews to doing classwork, studio work, sometimes I get so caught up in it and I think, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get this done. I'm never going to succeed. And I don't appreciate that these are all like aspects that are helping me get to the point. I guess because I haven't achieved a point that I thought about.
Well, here's the thing. You've achieved more than you think, right? You are, I don't even know how old you are, but you are already at this amazing point in your life because you're here. You're talking, I mean, you're doing interviews, you're a student. The one thing, and I love that. I want to just take a second to say, that's probably second advice is to get involved. And it sounds like you're totally involved, which is great. It can be a distraction. So the way you deal with that is you learn to schedule yourself and you learn to compartmentalize things and be there for those moments. Hey, I got to be in class from 8 to 10. Be in class at 8 to 10 and focus on that. I got to go and interview somebody, make sure you plan. And so that you're not sitting in class thinking about something else, because guess what? You're not in the moment, right? And so I think if you're a good scheduler and you are good at focusing on the tasks in front of you and not get distracted, I think that's a key to your success. But no, I encourage you to continue that. And I don't know your personal situation as far as like, are you connected to the profession? Please connect with the profession. There's so many designers out there that are dying to meet someone like you, who want to be your mentor, who want to help you, even if they get nothing out of it. And most people do not get anything out of it. They get the satisfaction of knowing that they were able to affect somebody else, and just the way they probably were affected by someone, right? Every good person I know, every successful person I know, when I talk to them about like, how'd you get here? They will always talk about somebody that told them something or that helped them and guide them. They will always reference somebody, right? I can right now tell you the 5 people that are most important to me, because I can, they were, they were helpful and instrumental in that point of my life. So please reach out. Obviously I'm going to make a plug real quick. Join organizations like ASID, right? Because that is a whole network, and we have so much programming that allow you to network and give you the opportunity to network. We just finished our national conference and students were there. They were standing there with like lead designers from Gensler's and HOK and successful, residential firm principals and founders, just talking to them, right? And to me, like when I was in school and if I was just doing just class and then, I would have never thought I could be doing that. And so get involved with as many things as you can, because they'll connect you and add to your life's experience, right? So.
Absolutely. And it's really nice to hear that designers and people in the design world are looking to help students, because as a student, I'm always fearful of like who I'm interviewing or who I'm going to meet. I'm like, oh, what if they don't want to speak to me, or what if they don't want to like help me with this? And it's the fear, but the uncomfortable factor of you got to push through it, because I've learned so much through these interviews and meeting all these people through different types of networking. And I think it's definitely influenced who I am as a designer. And my perspective of what my career could possibly be in the future.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, here's a couple other things. If they don't want to give you your time, they're not worth your time anyways, right? If they're like Miss or Mr. like architect or designer who like, oh, I don't have time for you, then they weren't the person for you anyways.
Mhm.
Secondly, if you find the people that are willing to engage with you, don't waste their time, right? When you do have that time, you meet with them, or when you have their attention, come with things that you want to talk about. You know, like if I'm mentoring someone, the last thing I want to do is like spend an hour with somebody and going, I don't know, Khoi, what do you think? No, like come to me going, hey, so I'm about to, you know, embark on this or that. Here are my options. Here's what I'm thinking about. In your experience, well, how would you deal with that? That gives me something to engage you with, right? And that gives me a reason or a direction in how I can help you. So that's the other part that's important. Just because you find a cool person and they become your mentor, it's not an automatic win. You got to utilize it in the right way, right? It's like you can have the nicest computer in the world. It ain't gonna draw for you, right? It's not gonna like write your papers for you, right? So it's a mentorship is a tool for you to be able to utilize, but you got to come prepared too. So
Absolutely. And I really appreciate that piece of advice in the end, to really utilize who you are speaking with. And I'm definitely going to use that in the future when I have to like find new mentors and like new people that I want to pick their brain apart. So it's definitely a good thing to keep in the back of my mind.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you for your wonderful advice and all of your words of wisdom about travel and design. I definitely am taking these into consideration with my future, and I hope that everyone who's watching does the same. So I really appreciate everything you've said.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed our conversation. So thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, and join ASID.
Of course. If you like this video, make sure you like, comment, and share, and tune in next week as the conversation continues from a student's perspective.
We hope you liked this discussion with the design industry from a student's perspective. Please like, share, and comment, and stay tuned for more inspiring conversations to come.